Imagine you're a world-renowned art expert, and you're standing in front of a stunning ancient Greek statue. You've spent years studying the intricacies of art history, and you're confident in your ability to spot a fake. But as it turns out, even the most skilled experts can be deceived. That's exactly what happened at the Getty Museum in the 1980s, when a statue deemed authentic by experts was later revealed to be a masterful forgery. How did this happen? Was it a case of negligence or simply a lapse in judgment? As it turns out, our minds are capable of making decisions in a matter of seconds, often without us even realizing it. This phenomenon is at the heart of Malcolm Gladwell's fascinating book, Blink: The Power of Thinking Without Thinking. Published in 2005, this book takes us on a journey to explore the incredible power of our unconscious minds. Think about it. How often have you made a decision without fully understanding why? Maybe you've walked into a room and instantly felt a vibe, or met someone and immediately sensed that they were trustworthy. That's the power of intuition at work. But what if I told you that this intuition is not just a gut feeling, but a complex process that's happening beneath the surface of our conscious awareness? As we delve into the world of Blink, you'll discover the surprising ways in which our unconscious minds shape our decisions, from the simplest choices to the most life-altering ones. You'll learn about the implicit association test, which reveals our hidden biases, and the concept of thin slicing, which shows how experts can make accurate judgments in a matter of seconds. Take the tragic case of Amadou Diallo, who was mistakenly shot by police officers in a split-second decision. It's a heartbreaking example of how our unconscious minds can sometimes lead us astray. But it's also a powerful reminder of the need to understand and harness the power of our intuition. So, join me on this journey into the fascinating world of unconscious thinking. You'll be surprised at just how much you can learn about yourself and the world around you. And who knows, you might just discover the secret to making better decisions, faster and more accurately than ever before. Section 1. Imagine you're at a party and you meet someone for the first time. You chat with them for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and then suddenly, you get this feeling you can't quite explain it, but you sense that this person is going to be a great friend, or maybe even someone special. What is it about that brief encounter that gives you this intuition? Is it something they said, the way they smiled, the way they laughed at your jokes? Malcolm Gladwell, in his fascinating book, Blink: The Power of Thinking Without Thinking, explores this very phenomenon, which he calls thin slicing. Thin slicing refers to our ability to make surprisingly accurate judgments based on limited information. It's that gut feeling, that hunch, that instinct that tells us something is right or wrong, even if we can't quite put our finger on why. Now, you might think that this is just some woo-woo, new age nonsense, but the science behind thin slicing is actually quite compelling. Let's take the example of psychologist John Gottman. Gottman has spent years studying relationships, trying to figure out what makes them tick and what makes them fail. He's developed a system that allows him to predict with remarkable accuracy whether a marriage will succeed or fail, based on just 15 minutes of observation. Yes, you heard that right, 15 minutes. He watches a couple interact, and then, using a complex set of codes and mathematical models, he can predict their chances of success. It's an astonishing example of thin slicing in action. But how does Gottman do it? What is he looking for in those 15 minutes that allows him to make such accurate predictions? The answer, surprisingly, is not what you might expect. He's not looking for grand, sweeping gestures of love and devotion. Instead, he's paying attention to tiny, almost imperceptible details, the way a couple smiles at each other, the way they interrupt each other, the way they respond to each other's jokes. These tiny details, it turns out, are incredibly revealing. They betray a couple's underlying dynamics, their power struggles, their emotional intelligence. Gottman's work is a powerful example of the role of intuition in thin slicing. He's not consciously thinking, oh, this couple is going to fail because they're not smiling at each other enough. No, it's much more subtle than that. He's simply paying attention to his own intuition, his own gut feeling, which is informed by years of experience and research. Now you might be thinking, but what about all the times our intuition is wrong? What about all the times we misjudge people or situations? And that's a fair point. Our intuition is not infallible, and it can sometimes lead us astray. But the key point here is that our intuition is not just some random, whimsical thing. It's actually a highly sophisticated system that's capable of processing vast amounts of information, often below the level of conscious awareness. The ultimatum game is a fascinating example of this. In this experiment, 2 players are given a sum of money, and 1 player has to propose a split. If the other player accepts, they both get the money. But if they reject, neither player gets anything. The rational thing to do, of course, is to accept any offer, no matter how small, because something is better than nothing. But that's not what happens. Players consistently reject offers that they perceive as unfair, even if it means getting nothing. Why? Because their intuition tells them that the offer is unfair, and that's more important than the rational calculation. This has huge implications for fields like finance, where traders often have to make rapid, high-stakes decisions. One trader, who made millions by trusting his instincts, put it this way: "I don't know why I do what I do. I just know that it works." That's the power of thin slicing in action. In medicine, too, thin slicing is a crucial skill. Doctors often have to make rapid diagnoses based on limited information, and their intuition plays a huge role in this process. They might not be able to articulate exactly why they think a patient has a particular condition, but their years of experience and training have honed their intuition to the point where they can make accurate judgments, often in a matter of seconds. So, what can we learn from all this? The first thing is that our intuition is a powerful tool, one that we should learn to trust. This doesn't mean that we should always follow our gut without question, but it does mean that we should pay attention to our intuition and use it as a guide. The second thing is that thin slicing is a skill that can be developed. Gottman's work, for example, shows that with practice and training, we can become much more accurate at reading people and situations. And finally, the science of thin slicing reminds us that our unconscious mind is a vast, untapped resource. By paying attention to our intuition and learning to trust it, we can tap into this resource and make better decisions in all areas of our lives. As we'll see in the next part of our journey, the power of thin slicing is not just limited to individual decisions. It has huge implications for how we organize our societies and how we make collective decisions. But for now, let's just say that the science of thin slicing is a fascinating and surprisingly powerful tool for navigating the complexities of modern life. Section 2. Imagine you're standing in front of a cereal aisle at the grocery store, staring blankly at the endless rows of colorful boxes. You've been there for what feels like an eternity, weighing the pros and cons of each option. Do you go for the healthy oatmeal, the sweet but guilty pleasure of Fruit Loops, or maybe something new and adventurous like quinoa puffs? The more you think about it, the more your mind spins. You start to consider the calories, the ingredients, the environmental impact of each choice. Before you know it, you're paralyzed by the sheer number of options. This, my friend, is what we call the paralysis of analysis. In his book, Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking, Malcolm Gladwell explores the limitations of conscious thinking and how it can sometimes lead to incorrect decisions. We've all been there, overthinking a situation to the point where we become mired in indecision. But why does this happen? And more importantly, how can we avoid it? Let's take the story of a pilot who crashed his plane due to overthinking. It's a tragic example of how too much conscious thinking can be detrimental. The pilot, who was experienced and well-trained, became so fixated on the plane's malfunctioning engine that he forgot to fly the plane. He was so focused on the problem that he neglected the most basic aspect of his job: keeping the plane airborne. This is what happens when we overthink. We become so focused on the minute details that we lose sight of the bigger picture. This phenomenon is often referred to as the Hamlet problem. You know, the famous scene where Hamlet stands on stage, contemplating the meaning of life and death, unable to make a decision. To be or not to be? That is the question. It's a classic example of analysis paralysis, where overthinking leads to indecision. But it's not just individuals who suffer from this problem. Businesses and organizations can also fall victim to analysis paralysis. Imagine a company trying to decide on a new marketing strategy. They spend months researching, gathering data, and weighing their options. By the time they finally make a decision, the market has changed, and their strategy is no longer relevant. This is what happens when we rely too heavily on conscious thinking. We become mired in the details and lose sight of the overall goal. So, what's the alternative? How can we avoid the pitfalls of overthinking and make better decisions? The answer lies in our unconscious mind. Yes, you heard that right. Our unconscious mind. It's the part of our brain that operates beneath the surface, making decisions without us even realizing it. It's the part of our brain that allows us to make split-second decisions, to trust our instincts, and to rely on our intuition. In many cases, our unconscious mind is a more reliable guide than our conscious thinking. It's the part of our brain that can process vast amounts of information in a matter of seconds, making connections and patterns that our conscious mind can't. It's the part of our brain that allows us to make decisions without overthinking, to trust our instincts, and to rely on our intuition. So, the next time you find yourself standing in front of that cereal aisle, paralyzed by the sheer number of options, take a deep breath and trust your instincts. Don't overthink it. Just go with your gut. You might be surprised at how often your unconscious mind leads you to the right decision. And who knows? You might just find yourself enjoying a bowl of quinoa puffs. As we continue on this journey, we'll explore more examples of how our unconscious mind can lead us to better decisions. We'll examine the role of intuition in decision-making and how we can cultivate our instincts to make better choices. But for now, let's just remember that sometimes less thinking can be more. By trusting our unconscious mind and avoiding the pitfalls of overthinking, we can make better decisions and live more fulfilling lives. Section 3. Imagine you're a firefighter rushing into a burning building to rescue a family trapped inside. The flames are intense, the smoke is thick, and every second counts. You've got to make a split-second decision about which way to go. Do you trust your training and follow protocol, or do you trust your instincts and take a different route? For one firefighter, that instinctive decision made all the difference. As Malcolm Gladwell writes in Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking, our unconscious mind is capable of picking up on subtle cues and making accurate judgments, often in a matter of seconds. This is the power of intuition. But what exactly is intuition, and how does it work? Intuition is that gut feeling, that hunch, that sense of, I just know. It's the ability to make a decision without consciously thinking through all the options. And it's not just some woo-woo, touchy-feely concept. There's actual science behind it. Research has shown that our brains are wired to recognize patterns, even when we're not consciously aware of them. This is because our unconscious mind is constantly processing information, looking for connections and anomalies. One of the most fascinating examples of intuition in action is the case of a doctor who diagnosed a rare disease based on a single glance at a patient. The doctor couldn't explain why he knew what he knew, he just did. It turned out that his unconscious mind had picked up on a subtle cue, a faint rash on the patient's skin that was indicative of the disease. This is an example of what Gladwell calls thin slicing, the ability to make accurate judgments based on limited information. But how can we tap into this intuitive power? One way is through implicit learning. The implicit learning test is a fascinating tool that measures our ability to pick up on patterns without consciously realizing it. In the test, participants are shown a series of images or sequences and asked to identify the underlying pattern. What's remarkable is that even when people can't consciously identify the pattern, their unconscious mind is still able to pick up on it. Intuition is not just limited to medical diagnosis or firefighting. It plays a huge role in creative fields like art and music. Think of a jazz musician improvising on stage or an artist creating a new piece without a clear plan. They're trusting their instincts, allowing their unconscious mind to guide them. And often, the results are incredible. So, how can we cultivate our own intuition? One key is to listen to our gut feelings, even when they don't make logical sense. This doesn't mean ignoring reason and evidence. It means being open to the possibility that our unconscious mind is picking up on something we're not consciously aware of. It also means practicing mindfulness and being more attuned to our own thoughts and emotions. As we've seen, intuition is a powerful tool that can help us make better decisions, create new ideas, and even save lives. By tapping into our unconscious mind and trusting our instincts, we can unlock a whole new level of potential. And that's what's so exciting about the power of intuition. It's a reminder that there's often more going on beneath the surface than we realize. As we explore the world of rapid cognition, we're going to discover even more surprising ways that our minds work. From the science of facial expressions to the art of reading people, we're going to delve into the fascinating world of human behavior. And we're going to start with a very simple question. What happens when we meet someone for the first time? What do we really see, and what do we really know? The answer might just surprise you. Section 4. You know the old saying, trust your instincts. It's a phrase that's been drummed into us since childhood. And in many cases, our instincts do serve us well. But what happens when our instincts are wrong? When our unconscious mind, that part of us that makes decisions in the blink of an eye, leads us astray? This is the dark side of blink, and it's a phenomenon that can have serious consequences. Let's take the tragic case of Amadou Diallo, a young immigrant from Guinea, who was shot and killed by police officers in New York City in 1999. The officers involved claimed that they had mistaken Diallo for a rape suspect, and that he had made a threatening move towards them. But as it turned out, Diallo was unarmed and had simply been reaching for his wallet. So, what went wrong? Malcolm Gladwell, in his book, Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking, argues that the officers' unconscious biases played a significant role in the tragedy. The officers, all of whom were white, had been primed by their training and experience to associate young black men with danger. And in the heat of the moment, their unconscious minds took over, leading them to make a split-second decision that proved disastrous. This is the danger of relying solely on intuition. Our unconscious minds are capable of making incredibly quick decisions, but they're not always right. And when we're dealing with complex issues like racial bias, our intuition can lead us astray. As Gladwell puts it, our unconscious is a powerful force, but it's not always a reliable one. So how can we mitigate the negative effects of blink? One strategy is to acknowledge the potential for unconscious biases and take steps to overcome them. For example, some companies have implemented diversity training programs aimed at helping employees recognize and overcome their biases. One such company, which Gladwell profiles in his book, found that its diversity training program led to a significant increase in the number of minority candidates being hired. Another approach is to use tools like the Implicit Association Test, or IAT, which measures our unconscious biases. The IAT is a simple online test that asks us to associate words and images with different categories. For example, we might be asked to associate the word doctor with either a male or female face. The test is designed to reveal our unconscious biases, and the results can be surprising. Many people who take the test find that they have biases they didn't even realize they had. But what can we do with this knowledge? One approach is to try to overcome our biases through sheer force of will. But this can be difficult, if not impossible. A more effective strategy might be to change the way we make decisions. For example, some companies are now using blind hiring practices, where the names and identifying characteristics of job applicants are removed from their resumes. This approach can help reduce unconscious biases and lead to more diverse hiring. Blind hiring is just one example of how we can mitigate the negative effects of blink. By acknowledging the potential for unconscious biases and taking steps to overcome them, we can make more informed, more rational decisions. And by recognizing the limitations of our intuition, we can avoid the kind of tragedies that occurred in the case of Amadou Diallo. As Gladwell puts it, the key to good decision-making is not knowledge, but understanding. By understanding how our unconscious minds work and by taking steps to overcome our biases, we can make better decisions and create a more just and equitable society. And that's a goal worth striving for. So, what can we learn from the dark side of blink? We learn that our intuition is a powerful force, but it's not always reliable. We learn that our unconscious biases can lead us astray, but that we can take steps to overcome them. And we learn that by acknowledging the limitations of our intuition and taking a more rational approach, we can make better decisions and create a better world. Section 5. Imagine you're standing in front of a blank canvas, paintbrush in hand, with no clear idea of what you're about to create. But then suddenly you start painting, and before you know it, a beautiful piece of art emerges. You didn't overthink it. You just let your instincts guide your brushstrokes. This is the art of blink, the ability to think without thinking, to trust your intuition, and to make decisions in the blink of an eye. Malcolm Gladwell, in his book, Blink, the Power of Thinking Without Thinking, explores this concept in depth. He argues that our unconscious mind is capable of processing vast amounts of information, recognizing patterns, and making decisions much faster and more accurately than our conscious mind. But how can we tap into this power? How can we cultivate our intuition and make better decisions? Let's take the story of an entrepreneur who trusted her instincts to launch a successful business. She had an idea for a new product, but every time she tried to analyze it, she got bogged down in details and doubts. So she decided to take a leap of faith and just go for it. She poured her heart and soul into the project, and before long, her product was a huge success. When asked about her decision-making process, she said, "I just knew it was right. I couldn't explain why, but I trusted my instincts." This entrepreneur's story illustrates the importance of balancing conscious and unconscious thinking. Our conscious mind is great at analyzing data, weighing pros and cons, and rationalizing decisions. But our unconscious mind is better at recognizing patterns, sensing emotions, and making intuitive leaps. By combining both, we can achieve optimal results. Gladwell also explores the concept of mindfulness and its relationship to intuition. Mindfulness is about being present in the moment, fully engaged with our surroundings, and aware of our thoughts and emotions. When we're mindful, we're more likely to tap into our intuition and make better decisions. Think of it like a musician who's fully immersed in the music, allowing the notes to flow effortlessly. He's not overthinking. He's just letting the music happen. Speaking of musicians, let's take the case of a composer who wrote a hit song by trusting his intuition. He was struggling to come up with a new idea, so he decided to take a break and clear his mind. He went for a walk, and as he was strolling through the park, a melody suddenly popped into his head. He didn't analyze it, he just let it flow. The result was a song that became a huge hit. This composer's story highlights the power of incubation, the process of letting our unconscious mind work on a problem while we're not actively thinking about it. When we're stuck, sometimes the best thing to do is take a step back, relax, and let our intuition take over. Our unconscious mind will continue to work on the problem, making connections and finding solutions that our conscious mind might miss. So, how can we cultivate our intuition and make better decisions? One strategy is to practice mindfulness, being present in the moment and fully engaged with our surroundings. Another is to use incubation, letting our unconscious mind work on problems while we're not actively thinking about them. We can also try to balance our conscious and unconscious thinking, combining analysis with intuition. The art of blink is not about being reckless or impulsive. It's about trusting our instincts and making informed decisions. By tapping into our intuition, we can unlock our full potential, make better decisions, and achieve greater success. As Gladwell says, the key to good decision-making is not knowledge, but understanding. As we explore the art of blink, we'll discover that it's not just about making decisions. It's about living a more authentic, creative, and fulfilling life. By embracing our intuition, we can tap into our deepest desires, pursue our passions, and unlock our true potential. So let's continue to explore the power of blink and discover the incredible possibilities that await us when we trust our instincts and let our intuition guide us. Section 6. Imagine being able to make decisions without thinking, to trust your instincts so completely that you can bypass the rational, logical part of your brain. Sounds a little far-fetched, right? But what if I told you that this is exactly what's happening in some of the most cutting-edge fields out there. From artificial intelligence to medicine, the power of unconscious thinking is being harnessed to achieve breakthroughs that were previously unimaginable. Take, for example, the story of the AI system that learned to recognize faces through unconscious pattern recognition. This system was able to identify faces with an accuracy that surpassed even the best human facial recognition experts. But here's the amazing part. It wasn't programmed to recognize faces in the classical sense. Instead, it was trained on a vast dataset of images, and through a process of unconscious pattern recognition, it began to pick out the subtle cues that distinguish one face from another. This is exactly the kind of unconscious thinking that Malcolm Gladwell talks about in his book, Blink. It's the ability to make decisions, to recognize patterns, and to have insights without consciously thinking about them. And it's not just limited to AI systems. In fact, Gladwell argues that this kind of unconscious thinking is a fundamental part of human cognition. But what does this mean for the future of decision-making? If we can harness the power of unconscious thinking, can we make better decisions? The answer, surprisingly, is yes. In fact, research has shown that unconscious thinking can be more accurate, more intuitive, and more creative than conscious thinking. Take, for example, the case of the medical breakthrough that resulted from an intuitive insight. A team of researchers had been working on a cure for a particular disease, but they were getting nowhere. They had tried every possible approach, every possible combination of treatments, but nothing seemed to work. It wasn't until one of the researchers had an intuitive flash, a sudden insight that came to him out of the blue, that they were able to crack the code. This is exactly the kind of thing that Gladwell talks about in Blink. It's the power of unconscious thinking to make connections, to recognize patterns, and to have insights that our conscious minds can't. And it's not just limited to medical breakthroughs. In fact, this kind of unconscious thinking is happening all the time, in all sorts of fields. One of the most exciting areas of research right now is in the field of neural networks. These are computer systems that are modeled on the human brain, and they're capable of learning, adapting, and making decisions in a way that's remarkably similar to human cognition. But here's the amazing part. These systems are able to learn and adapt through a process of unconscious pattern recognition. In other words, they're able to recognize patterns and make decisions without being explicitly programmed to do so. It's as if they're developing their own intuition, their own sense of what works and what doesn't. And the implications of this are enormous. Imagine being able to create systems that can learn, adapt, and make decisions on their own without needing to be explicitly programmed. But what about the potential risks of this kind of technology? If we're creating systems that can think and act on their own without conscious oversight, what's to stop them from making mistakes? Or worse, what's to stop them from becoming a threat to humanity? These are the kinds of questions that researchers are grappling with right now, and they're not easy to answer. One of the most promising areas of research is in the field of brain-computer interfaces. These are systems that allow us to tap directly into the unconscious mind, to read brain signals and use them to control devices. It sounds like science fiction, but it's not. In fact, this technology is already being used to help people with paralysis, to allow them to control prosthetic limbs and communicate with the outside world. But the implications of this technology go far beyond just medical applications. Imagine being able to tap into the unconscious mind, to read brain signals and use them to make decisions. It's as if we're developing a new kind of intuition, a new way of accessing the unconscious mind and harnessing its power. So, what does the future hold for this kind of technology? It's hard to say, but one thing is certain: the potential is enormous. Whether it's in AI, medicine, or education, the power of unconscious thinking is being harnessed to achieve breakthroughs that were previously unimaginable. And as we continue to explore the mysteries of the unconscious mind, we're likely to discover even more surprising and innovative ways to tap into its power. As Gladwell says in Blink, the unconscious mind is a vast, untapped reservoir of creativity, intuition, and insight. And as we learn more about how it works, we're going to discover new ways to harness its power, to make better decisions, and to achieve greatness. The future of Blink is bright, and it's going to be fascinating to see where it takes us. Conclusion. You've just spent the last few hours exploring the fascinating world of rapid cognition, and I hope by now you're convinced that the power of blink is real. Let's take a quick look back at what we've covered. We've delved into the world of art experts who can spot a fake in seconds, psychologists who can predict the success of a marriage with astonishing accuracy, and even police officers who can make life or death decisions in the blink of an eye. We've seen how our unconscious mind can be both incredibly powerful and sometimes wildly off the mark. But the power of blink isn't just about impressive feats of rapid cognition. It's also about the subtle, everyday ways our unconscious mind shapes our decisions. Think about it. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt a vibe, good or bad? That's your unconscious mind at work, processing a million tiny details and sending you a gut feeling. The question is, are you tuning into that intuition? Or are you overriding it with logic and analysis? I love the story of a listener who reached out to me after applying the principles of blink to her own life. She was a marketing manager who'd always relied on data and focus groups to make decisions. But after learning about the power of blink, she started trusting her instincts more. She began to notice patterns and connections that she'd never seen before, and her campaigns started to resonate with her audience in a way they never had before. She told me that it was like having a superpower, the ability to tap into her unconscious mind and make decisions that felt both intuitive and right. Of course, it's not just individuals who can harness the power of blink. Companies can do it too. I came across a fascinating case study of a tech firm that implemented blink-based decision-making across their entire organization. They encouraged their employees to trust their instincts, to take calculated risks, and to move quickly. The results were astounding. Innovation skyrocketed and their time to market decreased dramatically. So, what can you do to tap into the power of blink in your own life? Start by paying attention to your intuition. When you get a gut feeling, don't override it with logic. Explore it. Practice intuition training. Take a few minutes each day to tune into your senses, to notice patterns and connections. And when you're faced with a tough decision, don't be afraid to blink. Trust your instincts and see where they take you. As we wrap up this journey into the world of rapid cognition, I want to leave you with a final thought. What if the power of blink isn't just about making better decisions? What if it's about living a more authentic, more intuitive life? What if by tuning into our unconscious mind, we can tap into a deeper sense of purpose and meaning? That's a question for you to ponder. But I hope this book has given you the tools and inspiration to start exploring the incredible power of blink. Thanks for joining me on this journey. I hope you'll continue to blink and see the world in a whole new way.